Welcome, students. In this e-class, we would take up for discussion John Milton's second poem prescribed in your syllabus on his blindness. On his blindness is one of the finest sonnets in English poetry. This is an autobiographical sonnet, and it brings before us the views of John Milton upon his own blindness. In the earlier video class, I had told about the short biographical sketch of John Milton and about the poet. And we had come to know that Milton, he became blind in 1652, complete blind when he was 44 years of age. So, Milton's poem on his blindness is a reflection of his gloom and despair, the feeling of sadness and grief upon his turning blind. But the most important part of the poem is that it celebrates or it expresses the feeling of the poet and his belief of the supremacy of God and complete faith in destiny and God. Milton's sonnet on his blindness, also titled When I Consider How My Light is Spent, is one of the best known sonnets of John Milton. This sonnet was written around 1655. Milton's eyesight began to fail in 1644, and by 1652, Milton was totally blind. On his blindness has multiple themes. It has the frustration, the despair, the gloom, the sadness on one hand because of turning blind. On the other hand, it reflects Milton's complete faith in God, his patience, and God's omnipotence and God's omnipresence. Milton, he always asks himself what purpose he has in life. And he was a deeply religious man. He believed in fate, he believed in fortune, he believed in God. So when he turns blind, he questions himself that in what way now he would serve God. Because his way of serving God is to utilize his talent. And his talent was to write poetry and to express his faith on God. So, by becoming completely blind, he questions himself that in what way he would utilize his talent and would serve God. But he concludes by telling himself to be patient and accept his fate and his destiny, which is decided by God. He concludes by telling himself that God is all powerful and whatever he does is best for the human beings, and they have to accept everything that is given to them by God with utter patience and with true acceptance in believing to the dictates of God. So the final line of the poem, they also serve who only stand and wait. It reflects Milton's utter faith in fortune, fate, and whatever has been decided by God in Milton's life. So, let us read the text of the poem and discuss the poem. The poem begins: When I consider how my light is spent, array half my days in this dark word and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide, lost with me useless, though my soul more bent. So the poet, he begins with contemplating about his life before and after turning blind. So he considers that when his light is spent, when he has turned blind, and the world appears to him as dark and wide, and the talent which is given to him is lying with him useless. Although his soul is bent, is keen, is desirous, and the soul is bent towards, the poet says, to serve therewith my Maker and present my true account, lest he returning chide, doth God exact day labor light denied? I fondly ask, but patience to prevent. So the poet, he's quite worried about the talent which is given to him and which, because of his blindness, would lie unused. Here, the poet, he alludes to the parable of talents in chapter 25 of the Gospel of Matthew. In this famous parable, an employer who is going away for a time calls his three servants and give them talent. Talent is the money. And they have to utilize the talent to increase its value. He distributes the money, the talents to all three of them. And when the employer returns, he asks for the account of the talent, the money which was given to the servants. The first two servants return the money as doubled to 10 and to 4. Both men, they receive rewards. The third servants report that he has only one talent and he has done nothing, but he has kept it with him. So he has done nothing to increase the value, and instead what he did was that he buried it and returned the amount, returned the money to the employer. The master, the employer, he denounces him for his laziness. Now, this is the concern that Milton has, that because now his eyesight, they are failing, it has failed completely, and because of the loss of eyesight, how he is going to serve God, his Maker, because he has his. So the concern of the poet is that how he can serve his creator when he has lost his vision. And then he asks a question that, as the master, he asked all the servants about the talent, about the money which was given to them. In the similar way, would God also exact the labor of the day, means the utilization of talent in life, when the light has been taken away from him, when the light is denied to him? So he just wants to know that because of his fate, he has to spend half of his life in darkness. So, in what way he would be able to utilize the talent, and what reply he would give to his master, God, about the talent that was given to him to serve the Creator, the Master? So, the reply comes in the second half with patience. So, patience comes and it gives the reply. It prevents this conflict. And what does it say? So the poet says that murmur soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts, who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, thousand at his bidding speed. So patience, it replies with a murmur, and it replies that God, he is omnipresent, He is omnipotent, He is all powerful, and God does not need men's work or men's gifts. If we want to serve God, then we have to bear the mild yoke in a very submitting way. Means whatever comes to you, you have to accept it as the blessings from God, whether you're you are happy with it or you are not satisfied with it. So those are the best believers in God who accept their fate as it comes to them, as given by God without questioning. So they are the best servers of God because it means that they have accepted whatever has been given to them by God. So God does not need men's work or men's gift. How do we serve God in the best possible way? By bearing everything that is given to us by God. And then Milton describes that God's state, why God does not need men's gift or means men's work, because the state, the position of God is kingly, and thousands at the bidding speed, means at the bid, at the order of God, thousands are there, thousands of angels at the order of God. The poet says, and post over land and ocean without rest, they also serve who only stand and wait. So the poet concludes by convincing himself that God is all powerful. He does not need services of any human being because the state of God, the position of God is kingly. We are not in a position to judge the statements, the dictates, the fate, the destiny that is given to us by God. What we have to do is that we have to be very patient and humble, because those who bear the mild yoke of God, or like the angels who only stand and wait for the orders of God in a very patient way, in a very humble way, they serve the God best. So Milton, he assures himself that the acceptance of fate, the acceptance of the dictates of God is the best service by any human beings towards God. The sonnet, it tells us about the faith and confidence, complete confidence in God's will, and accept life as it is without complaint. Milton, he strongly believes that the duty of a human being is towards God, and whatever God does is essential and is in the ultimate good of mankind. So, without questioning, a man or a human being should accept God's will and dictates. The poem has two parts. In the first half, Milton is feeling frustrated and he's contemplating about his life after turning blind. He contemplates the loss of his eyesight and he feels bad that because of the loss of eyesight, he would not be able to serve God. Because he wants to utilize his talent to write poetry about God, to serve religion and God through his writing. But the second half of the poem reconciles the poet to his fate. The poet personifies patience, which is his inner self and which answers to his conflict, and which replies that God doth not need either men's work or his own gifts. They serve him best who bear his mild yoke. So, according to Milton, God is omnipotent, and a man, he is not in a position to question God's ways. The life that is given to a human being is given by God, and God is justified in every way to shape the life as it is given to a human being, and he has to accept it. John Milton's poem on his blindness is a Petrarchan sonnet. The rhyming pattern is ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE. The poem is divided into an octave and a sestate. The octave has two quatrain, and the sestate, it has two stanzas of 3 lines each. The first part, it presents the conflict, and the later part of the poem, it reconciles the poet to his fate, and it gives an assurance to the poet in resolving the conflict which is there in his life. This sonnet, it is highly elusive, and Milton adopted Petrarchan style in writing this sonnet. He brought back the sonnet to its original and strict type, the type which was familiarized or which was popularized by Petrarch. The language used is learned and remote from familiar associations. The parable is taken from Bible, and Milton, he presents a wide various learning through this sonnet, the philosophy and reflection towards life, towards fate, and towards destiny. The poem begins with a contemplation, and it has multiple themes like faith in God, acceptance, patience, and it sums up God's omnipotence and God's omnipresence and the power of God for human beings. So, despite his blindness, despite the fact that his fate has been designed in a way in which it would be very difficult for him to write and to utilize his talent, Milton finally accepts his destiny, and the poem reflects the complete faith in God. So the sonnet, it raises a problem and it provides a solution also, that human beings, they should not complain about God's ways. The faith and confidence in God should not be shaken in any way. It is to be noted that Milton is always remembered and praised for Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistus, the masterpieces which he wrote when he was blind. So, the sonnet, it believes in the mercy of God, in the ways of God, and in the supremacy of God and complete faith in God.